Last time, on Samsara 3, we covered the initial diversification of life in the prehistoric oceans, a time period known as the Protogene. I only showed a fraction of the clades that are likely to have emerged, but for the sake of sanity, I'm okay with that. Today, I'll be covering the latter half of the Protogene and the creatures that came with it. 30 million years is a long time to cover in one video, so grab some popcorn, a glass of water, maybe a warm blanket, and then sit back and relax. Welcome, friends, to Samsara 3. This one will be a bit of a doozy. In case you're new here, Samsara 3 is a fictional planet and world-building project created by yours truly. Samsara 3 has complex alien life and an equally alien environment to go along with it. A chlorinated atmosphere, acidic oceans, and vast polar ice sheets makes for one hell of a spawning ground for the variety of organisms adapted to live there. Life has actually individually developed twice here and has been completely snuffed out once. Last episode, we saw the emergence of two phyla, with 5 clades spread between the two. Stomozoa and dodecapoda are likely to contain many hundreds of species by now, but of course the scope of this project is quite limited. Even still, across the millions of years of this planet's history, going forward, we are likely to see many hundreds of clades come and go. Today we will see but a few. We have not yet spoken of the plants on this planet, and for no good reason. In the early Protogene, plants are relegated to clouds of plankton absorbing sunlight and atmospheric gases to metabolize. Let's say the most common type of phytoplankton uses a dark gray pigment to photosynthesize, largely due to the star's low luminosity, only around 50% that of our own sun. However, with the warming oceans and retreating ice caps, one clade of these plankton, which will be taxonomically referred to as phyophytes, might undergo an extraordinary adaptation. Multicellularity has already occurred at least once in the common ancestor of stomozoans and dodecapods, though likely has happened more than once. In plants, however, it is only happening now. Initially, it may start as large mats of grayscale vegetation carpeting the surface of the water, absorbing all sorts of things they need to live and grow. Remember, though, that the atmosphere is roughly 1% hydrogen chloride, which dissolves in water, making hydrochloric acid. Although the acid is diluted, it could still pose an issue for largely stationary organisms, which these plants are. This may result in the plants developing a thick outer cuticle, likely out of some sort of polymer. Put simply, a plastic, due to their low reactivity. This burst in biomass could possibly deoxygenate parts of the ocean, if not for the rising sea levels. More water is constantly being added, which dilutes the anoxic water. The rising sea levels also bring another gift for the phyophytes: shallow seas. These plants float at the surface of the water, which makes them well adapted to colonize new areas. Last time, we witnessed the emergence of the stomozoan reefs, vast fields of flesh that exist wherever there's marine snow, bits of organic debris that sink to the lower levels of the water column. These colonies rely on the current to bring them food, so may not fare well in stagnant areas. This leaves much of the seafloor uninhabited, and a clade of plants might just step in to claim it. Let's say a group of phyophytes becomes denser than the water around them and thus sinks to the bottom. Without any discernible anchor, they're likely to be pushed around by the current, which could possibly damage the plant. That's not including the issue of getting nutrients. How's an organism so intrinsically tied to the surface going to survive at the seabed? Firstly, a rudimentary root system may develop. Nothing too fancy, perhaps just some fibers that dig into the sand and rock underneath the plant. Next, something kind of fancy. To tackle the metabolism problem, the species may grow taller and wider until they are capable of absorbing enough sunlight and dissolved nutrients to keep themselves alive. The, for lack of a better word, leaf on this organism is likely to get in the way of the current, so may evolve spaces in them to let water pass through without causing damage. You may be thinking to yourself that these seem to look a lot like Earth's seaweed, and you would not be wrong. The seaweed body plan has supposedly evolved several separate times on our planet, so is likely to occur on Earth-like planets throughout the universe. That, kids, is convergent evolution, a phenomena where unrelated species evolve in similar ways in response to similar pressures. These new plants, which I'll call paradophytes, will spawn many new aquatic ecosystems and create many open niches to fill. Stomozoa, and by association Trisulcostoma, are likely to undergo many adaptations by this time. There are many open niches, after all. Imagine if, in almost a complete opposite to what happened during the development of the paradophytes, a clade of Trisulcostoma becomes less dense than the water surrounding them, floating, higher up. This would allow for much easier access to the plankton they feed on and would initially keep them generally safe from whatever predators may seek them out. They may accomplish this by, in a similar vein to the transition from basal echinoderms to sea stars, flipping upside down. Recall how the stomozoans reproduce by budding and allowing the polyps to float off into the current. One species may end up evolving what is called neoteny, a retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. This could show in the organisms retaining their ocean-going lifestyle even when sexually mature, though would still be largely immobile on their own due to their reliance on the ocean currents. Eventually, a species may develop more numerous setae on the tongue, forming a sort of net between the tentacles, which will still be able to be retracted into the body. This new clade of stomozoans, known as antistomes, will initially find success throughout the open oceans, though competition may rise from a fairly expected place. The flagellanaths are so far the undisputed masters of many oceanic ecosystems. Their change from median-paired fin locomotion to anguilliform locomotion and the resulting increase in speed helped them cement themselves as top-order carnivores. But as is common in nature, their reign is not absolute. A group of more specialized flagellanaths may emerge, more adapted for high speeds and less adapted for maneuverability. Their fins, which so far have been fairly broad and evenly spaced, may thin and cluster farther towards the back of the animal. The evolution of different styles of swimming probably won't happen in order and will likely happen multiple times in unrelated groups, but for simplicity's sake, I'll structure it as linear. An early offshoot of this new group may change into moving only the back 2/3 of the body for locomotion, keeping the front third relatively still, a style known as subcarangiform swimming. Like in the change from the ancestral dodecapods to the flagellanaths, this allows for more speed at the cost of maneuverability. This increase in speed and decrease in maneuverability may decrease overall stability, which would be problematic when swimming at newly attainable high speeds. They may counteract this with the development of a dorsal fin. Many groups of aquatic animals have developed dorsal fins, even secondarily aquatic ones, and often it has to do with an increase in speed. Not always, but often. Compare manatees and dolphins. Both are secondarily aquatic mammals, but dolphins are significantly faster than manatees, and as such are more pressured into being hydrodynamic. Many whale species, the extinct ichthyosaurs, and the extinct Spinosaurus are all probably examples of secondarily aquatic animals evolving dorsal fins. In the case of Spinosaurus, while it would help with underwater stability, the purpose of the scale is hard to say as of now, considering the shape of Spinosaurus seems to change like twice a year. These new, faster flagellanaths are still quite stable across their three axes, so the dorsal fin may be relatively small. We don't have any evidence for such fins in animals that have other ways to maintain stability, such as pinnipeds, the extinct metriorhynchids, and the extinct mosasaurs, which all have fairly broad fins. These new flagellanaths, which we'll call caudopods, will inevitably adapt further. The next step up from subchorangiform swimming in terms of speed is what's called chorangiform swimming. Original, ain't it? Where only the hind third of the animal is used in propulsion, which increases the amount of force relative to the area that the force is spread across. This, as should be expected by now, increases speed at the cost of maneuverability. Something that may come from this is not yet seen in dodecapods, and that's variation in fin shape. This may show as the first pair of fins lengthening for stability and the last pair of fins broadening for more efficient swimming, and the pairs in between atrophying, likely reduced to stabilizers or perhaps something analogous to the claspers in some fish being adapted for a role in mating or display. You may start to notice that these cotypods, which we'll call allopods, are becoming increasingly more fish-like in shape, which is somewhat to be expected. Hydrodynamic body plans are likely to emerge in aquatic organisms on Earth-like planets simply due to the adaptive pressures involved in living in water. Though, I will say, the swimming style of flagellanaths are outwardly more analogous to cetaceans than true fish, but that's really just because of the horizontal tail. The morphological changes in the allopods will only cause further changes. For example, increased spine mobility is needed. Well, they don't really have a spine. In fact, they lack any sort of mineralized endoskeleton, though it's not impossible that they've had some sort of notochord or other structural support even as far back as the ancestral flagellanaths. Another likely adaptation is the lengthening of the dorsal fin just because of the added stability at higher speeds. It's unlikely that this will be the final step the cotypods take towards speed, and it may culminate in a final form. A bizarre final form. The final form of swimming that will evolve in the late Protogene is thunniform locomotion, where virtually all thrust is provided by the tail fin itself. In our thunniform allopods, the rearmost limb pair may elongate and stretch into a large lunate caudal fin, and the other pairs may also specialize. The front three pairs may grow in such a way where the third limb pair is the one used for steering, the first two acting as stabilizers. The fourth and fifth pairs of fins may atrophy almost completely, only being used as additional stabilizers. The dorsal fin may move farther forward and get taller as well, with increased size lending to increased stability. Thunniform locomotion is most efficient at high speeds, which may evolve to these allopods, which we'll call anisopods, being some of the fastest animals yet to evolve. As can be assumed, this group is likely to contain apex predators, though remember that any of these forms of swimming are likely to evolve independently multiple times among multiple clades. It's not unheard of for multiple clades to co-evolve, an evolutionary arms race, if you will. Remember the pavemapods? Well, they've been evolving in the background all this time. They are by this point the largest and most successful benthic animals that have come from the dodecapod phylum. The only, actually, but that still means they're the most successful. And they have certainly been diversifying. Imagine if an early offshoot of the ancestral pavemapods develops more muscular, more vertical legs, perhaps to support a growing size. A larger body would provide multiple things for these new forms. They're harder to predate, they travel more efficiently, and they have room for a larger gut, among other things. These new large sizes may allow these new pavemapods, which we'll call hypsopods, to fill previously open niches, such as becoming the first obligate herbivores in the Protogene oceans, using their more expansive mouths and stomachs to process the tough, waxy plant fibers. This is not all of what the hypsopods will be. There will likely still be many detritivores and generalists, and some may even use their new size to become carnivorous, eating other benthic fauna such as the stomozoans and other dodecapods. They are still relatively small and defenseless, which may prompt adaptations and camouflage, some biological, some ecological. What I mean is that there are likely to be many species that have evolved coloration to blend in with the substrate or their environment, such as sand, rocks, or stomozoans, while others may evolve traits like winding serpentine bodies that can be maneuvered in between solid objects to escape and confuse danger. These adaptations will only push their predators to adapt to better spot and pursue their prey, which will in turn prompt other adaptations in some hypsopods. Defensive structures have evolved a probably uncountable number of times on Earth. Rhinoceros, horns, ankylos or osteoderms, the banded scutes of cingulates, etc. Mineralized armors are only a subgenre of possible animal defenses, but just due to how common they are, it's likely that they'll evolve on Samsara 3. A small near defenseless groups of hypsopods may over time start to incorporate more and more minerals into their skin, which would of course help with deterring predators, or at least make attempted predation less effective. However, this would render the skin more and more inflexible over time, which would decrease their overall mobility. They may overcome this, however, by having multiple segmented plates of armor, which are likely composed of some sort of calcium compound, maybe calcium carbonate. This is not only an excellent defense mechanism, but it also acts as a resource sink that can be tapped into during nutrient-poor times. This clade is likely to have many variations in structure, as mineral contents vary from place to place. Deep-sea species may incorporate more iron, whereas coastal species may have more chlorine in their shells as a result of the dilute hydrochloric acid that makes up the ocean's surface. Specific differentiation is unlikely to just be in chemical makeup of the shells, however. Some species may have more plates than others, some might be larger, maybe even significantly larger. Some may have sharp protrusions to further dissuade predators. It's hard to say. What's shown here is only an overview of what some may look like. These hypsopods, which we'll call arthroderms in respect to their armored hide, may quickly spread to wherever the ancestral hypsopods are not, and possibly some places that they are. They could possibly reach fairly large sizes as well, as the exoskeleton would provide more support than just meat. They are likely to, despite all odds, thrive in the competitive oceans of the Protogene and will likely thrive for many millions of years to come. Let's get back to sea level. Teeth are not something that have evolved into decapods yet, probably because there's been no need. They aren't evolving now, just to clarify, but I thought I'd say that so I don't confuse people with the upcoming critter. During times of plenty, filter feeding can be one of the least metabolically taxing lifestyles out there. Look at the number of massive filter feeders on Earth. Whale sharks, basking sharks, the extinct lead-sichthies, actual whales, the group home to the largest confirmed animal to have ever lived. Even the Ordovician radiodont Egyrocassis was massive for its time, reaching 2 meters or more. What I'm trying to say is filter feeding leads to large body sizes. At least it tends to. Which will likely happen in the Protogene. Let's say a species of allopod specializes in feeding on small animals that can easily catch, perhaps evolving broader oral tentacles in the process. Over the millennia, this clade may evolve growing baleen-like structures, better for filtering smaller and smaller organisms until eventually they can feast upon the clouds of plankton blanketing the surface. This will result in larger sizes, which can more efficiently take in more food, which in turn fuels larger sizes. The growth will not be unrestricted, however, due to a little thing called the square cube law, which states that as a shape grows in size, its volume grows faster than its surface area. What this means is essentially if you take, say, a cube and double it in all dimensions, its surface area increases by a factor of 4 and the volume increases by a factor of 8. As these allopods, which we'll call contronaths, grow larger, they'll have more and more pressures to be able to eat more and more food. This will restrict them to about 2, maybe 2.5 meters at maximum by the end of the Protogene, but smaller species will of course be around. Speaking of the end of the Protogene, we've reached it, and the period does not end peacefully. A sudden rise in tectonic activity, specifically volcanism, metaphorically sets the world on fire. A massive influx of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere raises the average temperature several degrees, which may not seem like much but throws the globe into turmoil. The polar ice caps melt, raising sea levels. Compounds such as carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide are thrust up into the clouds by the volcanoes, resulting in mass acid rains. I know not all of you like chemistry, so I'll keep it brief. Sulfur dioxide reacts with hydrogen chloride found in the atmosphere and the surface to create hydrogen sulfide and chlorine monoxide, among some other possible reactions. Hydrogen sulfide is very toxic and would only further acidify the oceans, whereas chlorine monoxide would strip away the ozone layer, allowing for more solar radiation to pour into the planet. The end Protogene mass extinction leaves Samsara 3 as a hot, acidic, radioactive hellscape, much as how life ended the last time. This time, however, life will bounce back. But you don't get to see how. Next time, a new age will dawn on Samsara 3, one hotter, wetter, and weirder. Discord server link is in the description. We'd love to have you there. Go rest your eyes, you've been looking at your screen for a while, and remember to have a nice day. See ya.